That's right. 16 differences, not three. Most people are arguing literally about the wrong stuff when they talk about homeschool and public school. My name's Daniel, and I've been a homeschooling dad now for over 2 decades. And so here we go. I'm going to give it to you as rapid fire as I possibly can. Number one is the government school system is compulsory and homeschooling is not. I'm going to start here because the rest of this list flows from this very concept. And I'm going to make this the longest point because I want to kind of like drill this home so that you get the foundation for everything that's to come. Look, school is not optional. It's the law. You're required by force to educate your child in a certain way. I believe if you stop and you think about that, it's a little bit strange. We don't force people to do anything else that we think is like deeply personal, right? But somehow when it comes to education, we think that it's actually okay and even good to mandate it. We don't let people choose it. It's something that they're forced to have to do. You see, homeschooling doesn't have that same kind of coercive element to it by nature. Homeschooling, in fact, is not one thing. It takes on many different forms. But whatever form that it takes on, at the end of the day, the families and the children are able to figure out what works best for themselves. And that can change depending on the season of life. It could change depending on the size of the family. It could change depending on the interests of the child, whatever it is. But a compulsory education system can't do that. It can't mold and bend and shape depending on needs and preferences. Because a compulsory system, in order to make it like efficient and make it cost effective, it has to be basically a one size fits all type system. And so there you have it. Compulsory education creates one size fits all. 30 kids in a classroom, one teacher, going at a certain pace, trying to meet certain standards. And everything that follows in this list follows because one is compulsory and one is natural. And everything that flows downstream from that, everything I'm about to point out to you in this list, is because of the nature of that compulsory system versus a system that can be tailored and modified and adjusted day in and day out according to the needs of the child and the family. So here we go. I think some of these things might surprise you. So number 2 on the list, compliance versus curiosity. School is literally designed to create compliant followers. That's the model because it has to be. It's compulsory. It's one size fits all. So it needs to have kids fall in line. But homeschool doesn't have to have that. It's not compulsory. It doesn't have to look one way. So your kids, who they are, can be affirmed. So one system needs compliance to function, and the other one can allow curiosity to be the driver. Number 3, grades become identity versus grades become data. Remember, school has millions of kids, and so they have to gather information to judge whether or not their bureaucratic system is working. So your kids, all their testing and their grades, all of that is information that's feeding a system. And that system is saying, this is how it must look. Are we getting kids inside of here? Are they lining up inside of this view of how it should look? And if your kids don't, then they're not normal, right? They're either gifted or they're challenged. Either way, it becomes a verdict on who they are. But homeschooling doesn't have a mold that kids must fit into. So when there's a bad grade, that's not a verdict on who they are. A parent can simply say, okay, well, that's not working. Maybe we try it this way, or maybe we switch to this for now, or maybe they're in a bad mood, or maybe they need a hug. But it's information. It's not a verdict on who that child is. Number 4, labels versus levers. School runs on labels. A, B, C, D, F. Gifted, handicapped, whatever we call it. You're a failure. You're a problem child. You're a disruption. And man, when that label sticks, it can be with you for years and years and years, really your whole life. But homeschooling runs on levers. It doesn't run on labels like that. When a kid has a ton of energy and they can't sit still, you don't label him a disruption. You don't think, oh man, I got to give this kid drugs. You take him to the park. You go on a nature hike. You play catch. You do push-ups. Whatever. You just recognize that that's that kid's natural state right now. And that's okay because that kid doesn't need to conform. So look, if any of that's hitting home so far, I want you to understand there is a link down below for my school group. If you want to give your kids a better life and a better future, government schools are not the solution. They're not. Don't listen to the so-called experts. They believe in their system, but their system has some major, major problems to it. If you want to do better, join the group and become one of the parents that can give their kids a whole different experience in life. Number 5 is locus of control. And because school is compulsory and it's a one-size-fits-all system, there's a constant clash of wills. When the kid's will goes up against the system, guess whose will wins? The kid will, in time, learn to conform. And if they don't, things just get harder for them. And they get labeled a certain way, as we've already talked about. And that clash of wills destroys something in a child called an internal locus of control. And this is not some small thing. This is a major thing. And I don't know why more people don't talk about it. But the thing is that an internal locus of control means that you believe your actions have impact and shape your life. And there's lots of research that shows that when your internal locus of control diminishes, your depression and anxiety goes up. Who doesn't like to feel like they have some control over their life? You see, homeschooling doesn't have that clash of wills. A child can grow up learning that they matter, that they can make an impact, that they get to dictate some things about their life. They don't have to wait for someone else to dictate everything to them. Which one do you think is going to have a better future in life, especially in the age of AI? Number 6 is the carrot and the stick versus a love of learning. To keep this machine of learning we call public school moving, to keep kids moving on that conveyor belt, school must lean on the carrot and the stick. They use grades, gold stars, rewards, detention, suspension, bad marks, different things like that, to try to coerce or manipulate your child into the conformity that the school is desiring, and to try to pull out the performance that they want to see. But homeschooling doesn't need a conveyor belt. As a homeschooling parent for over 2 decades, I've been asked so many times what grade my kid is in. I don't even know. I don't know the answer because we're not on a conveyor belt. We don't treat them like you go from one station to the next, to the next, to the next. We're building a whole human being. We tailor our lives, our home, our habits, our routines to match them, to meet their needs, to make them be the best person that they could possibly be. Studies have shown that kids do worse academically over the long haul when they have to lean on the carrot and the stick. As a matter of fact, they do worse on pretty much everything in life when their motivation comes from the carrot and the stick. Number 7 is age segregation. For 99.999999% of human history, kids learned in mixed age groups. Older kids taught younger kids, and younger kids learned how to reach up. And school locks everybody into the same age box. And some bizarre things happen where kids on a campus can't even be friends just because they're one grade separated. How does that prepare you for life when you get out there, you're going to be with people who are 20, 30 years older than you or younger than you? Homeschool doesn't have that problem. Not even close. As a matter of fact, as a parent, I marvel sometimes when I see kids who are 16 playing with 5-year-old kids. It's a beautiful sight. Number 8 is unstructured play. Over the years, school keeps cutting back on unstructured play, on recess, so that they can make more and more time for instructional time and structured activities. Homeschooling obviously doesn't have that constraint. They can have as much unstructured time as they want. And this matters because researchers like Peter Gray and countless others have talked about the intellectual, spiritual, emotional toll that a child takes on their system when they're not allowed to have unstructured play. Unstructured play for a child literally is the education that they need to be a human being. But schools damage that. They get in the way of that. They actually see it a lot of times as though it's a problem. Number 9 is textbooks versus great books. I'll grant you, in government schools, they do incorporate a little bit of great books in English. But did you know there's great books like in every single subject? I didn't really know that until later on in life when, as a homeschooling parent, I started to lean on great books and not textbooks. But textbooks suck. They're like this distilled, just clinical, boring version of something. And it leaves out context. It leaves out flavor. Whereas a great book, it's like you're peering into the soul and the mind of the person who took their life's work and they put it into this format that you can read in 5 to 10 hours. And you can take all of their life's work and put that inside of you. And schools lean almost exclusively on textbooks. Number 10 is that bells control the day at school. John Taylor Gatto was New York State Teacher of the Year. And at one point, he started to realize that he was damaging kids by being a teacher, and he didn't want to do that anymore. One of the things that he really hated was the fact that if there was a kid in his classroom who was completely immersed in a piece of poetry, passionate about this piece of poetry, at the moment that bell rang, that kid had to pack up their stuff, lose their train of thought, exit their state of flow, have their passion removed from them, pack up and go to the next station for the day. Somebody else's routine, somebody else's system, their design for that child's life was going to interfere with that child's moment to engage in a piece of poetry that was so inspirational to that child. What kind of system is that? And guess what? You might have figured it out. That's not a problem in homeschooling. Number 11 is pace. Government schools, because again, they're compulsory, they're one size fits all. They have an arbitrary pace for how kids should learn, when they should read by, when they should know algebra by, when they should know this historical fact by. But you know, the funny thing is that doesn't take into account the fact that every kid is different and that kids have learning phases and that not all phases develop at the same rate and that interests change over time. And let's say in school, you're learning a certain thing. A kid has not mastered that thing. Well, it's time to move on. That kid now never mastered that particular thing. Even if they wanted to, they're forced to have to move on to the next thing. So in school, it's not about getting the information, the knowledge, the mastery through the kid. It's about getting the kid through the stuff, getting them through the program. In homeschooling, it's about getting the material, the stuff, the mastery through the child, changing who they are, changing their relationship with learning and education for the rest of their life. Number 12 is worksheets versus hands-on. Because homeschoolers don't have a rigid schedule, it's not a compulsory one-size-fits-all system. They can spend plenty of time going to museums, meeting mentors, doing internships and apprenticeships. Whereas kids in a government classroom, they're in a classroom. They have a lot harder time getting hands-on with the real world. As a matter of fact, they're in this building that looks kind of like a prison, and they're removed from the real world. Homeschool kids, they get to go out into the real world. They get to experience things. And there's something really powerful about that. Benjamin Hardy, in his book, Personality Isn't Permanent, talks about how your vision for your future is capped by your experiences. So a homeschool kid can have so many experiences and learn about all these different things that are available to them as they mature. So when they want to chart the course of their life, they have all of that experience to lean on, and they can decide, that's how I want my life to look. Number 13 is peer orientation. You know that thing that happens to teenagers where they just want to play on their phone, text their friends all day long, hang out with friends all day long, play video games with their friends all day long. They don't want anything to do with their parents. They don't want to sit at the table and eat with them. They don't want to talk to them. They don't want to look at them. They don't want to take advice from them. Well, there's a name for that. It's called peer orientation. It's something that schools promote. It's the eroding of the natural attachment that a kid has to their parents. And it actually really is something that comes with big downside, because That natural attachment is the thing that's ultimately going to give that kid a line of communication to the people who are supposed to be speaking the values and the beliefs and giving the guidance to that child as they mature into adults. But instead, they go to their peers, so you end up with blind leading the blind. You get teenage rebellion. And we have this weird culture that what's young and hip and all that kind of stuff is what's in, and what the elders, what the people who have all the wisdom think is all stupid and useless. Gordon Neufeld talks about this in his book, Hold On to Your Kids. It's not a homeschooling book. It's a psychology book. He talks about how detrimental this is. And if you want to stave off this negative effect, homeschooling is a way better alternative where you're going to be able to connect with your kids day in and day out and control, as Gordon Neufeld says to do, the amount of influence that their peers have on their life. Number 14 is management versus modeling. A teacher's job is to manage. They're to control the environment, control the kids, make the system work, continue the conveyor belt. A parent doesn't have that. It's not 1 versus 30. And this means that learning doesn't happen in a disconnected way. It's real. And so where the teacher has to use the carrot and the stick, the parent can model. The parent can go on their own growth journey. They can read the great books. They can do the work in their own life. And there's no way to impact the life of a child greater than through how you model your life as a parent. Advantage, homeschool, yet again. Number 15 is authenticity. Gabor Mate talks about how kids have 2 core needs, attachment and authenticity. Attachment is to their primary attachment, their parents, which we already talked about how school chips away at that and destroys that and creates peer orientation. The other one that matters is authenticity, and that's where you have an attachment to yourself. And school also destroys that. The thing is that of the 2, the one that matters the most on a primal level is your attachment, because your attachment is where your roof over your head, your clothing, your food, your water, all the basic necessities of life come from the attachment. So we're naturally wired to sacrifice authenticity for attachment. And what Gabor Mate says is that when you sacrifice your authenticity, you find out later on in life that you don't even know who the heck you are. And you actually do damage to your nervous system. Homeschool can be tailored to meet the needs of each child. What their authenticity is gets to be held up and celebrated. It is not in conflict with a homeschool, but it is in conflict with school. Number 16 is the last difference that I want to talk about in this list, and it's the difference between an expert and a parent. When a kid goes to a school, he's in a bureaucratic environment. A bureaucratic environment is one in which the incentives get kind of perverse, because in order for a bureaucratic environment to actually increase their budget, they have to have bad results. They got to say, hey, look, our test scores are dropping, so we need to raise the budget so we can teach better. And so that's how you increase your revenues, right? Is by doing worse. It's kind of like a weird race to the bottom type of system. And I think that's why we're seeing this constant, perpetual schools are getting worse and worse and worse and worse. I think that's at least one of the main reasons why. It's a bureaucracy. Labor unions kind of run the show. They don't care about your kids. But a homeschool kid, they're with the people that love them more than anybody else could ever even imagine loving them. Nobody else will love them that much. It's a kind of love that's deeply rooted at the soul level. It's a love that is defining of who that child is. Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld, they talk about that. That natural attachment to the parent is the most important thing. And so when we talk about expertise, we talk about credentials and pedagogy and things like that, we leave out the fact that a teacher, an expert, is operating in a bureaucratic system. That however well-intentioned that teacher is, they're in a weird system. It's one that's based on a system that's compulsive and it relies on the carrot and the stick. The natural attachment is eroded. Peer orientation flourishes. And so these teachers are almost having to overcompensate by getting credentials and getting all this education and learning all these tricks and these hacks to try to get the best out of kids so they can conform to the system. Whereas a parent naturally loves their kids. They're naturally attuned to their kids. They want the best for their kids. They can shape their day and their life and their culture of their home to meet the needs of their child. Let's just say it this way. Teachers are trying to catch up to what you already got. You're the expert. You just need a little bit of fine tuning, a little bit of growth, and go on your own journey. Your kids get to watch that journey. It's part of their education. And again, I have a school group, links in the description, and it's for parents who want to go on that journey, who want to grow, who want to become better, who want to keep climbing the ladder so that their kids can get the best that they could possibly get out of homeschooling. So come join us. It's free. I'll see you on the other side. Like and subscribe. Appreciate you. Have a good day.